now he can't go back to his old life. Or can he? Days turned into months, and the government kept a tight leash on the opposition and the young people. They seemed real defeated. I went about my daily routine of teaching during the day and spending most of the evenings with Jane. She would come over with her books and study while I grade papers as the sun set over the ocean. Sometimes we would talk for hours, Jane asking all kinds of questions about the voodoo culture. I tell you what, it was real nice talking to she. I mean, she melodic voice kept my mind off all the crazy things going on around me. The Diablesse had not shown up for a while, so I went back to sitting at the window, enjoying the Caribbean nights. December 1978 was a real lonely month. Jane had went home for the Christmas holidays, and the island was packed with people visiting their families from America or England. The opposition party were becoming real restless again. I mean, it seemed like every week there were meetings or rallies. Everywhere I went on the island, pockets of young people were standing around talking. They were becoming more and more discontented with the political situation. There were some scrimmages between them and the secret police, but the worst was when an inspector on the force was assassinated. Man, I tell you what, the whole bloody place was in chaos. I mean, them damn police was arresting everybody. People were leaving the island like crazy, afraid they would be locked up too. One of my friends took a job on the banana boat just because there was a rumor that he was one who shot the policeman. But soon enough things calmed down a little and people tried their best to go on with their lives. I had let my hair grow out and it was fast becoming as long as Mr. Hobson's pretentious afro. My relationship with some of the teachers had become strained for so. I did not really care because I too was becoming fed up of the colonialist rule, and I even attended some of the opposition rallies. In late February of 1979, the atmosphere on the islands was real tense. So tense, I stopped going to the political meetings and was writing more than ever. My hair was long to my shoulder, dreaded up. Yeah man, I was a Rasta now. Much to the disdain of the other teachers and the education board, I started following the Rastafarian faith. I even started smoking up the herb with the fellas in them, listening to Bob Marley and other reggae artists all the time. Hell, I even started attending Rasta ceremonies. I tell you, those boys had some of the best ganja anyway. Jane and I were still seeing each other, and that was the only true stable thing in my life. The Diablesse had not approached me, nor had I thought much about she. Thank God, because for a while there, I thought I was going crazy. One morning, I was preparing for the day's teaching and listening to the radio when suddenly it went silent. So I walked into my bedroom and smacked it a little, when suddenly a voice I had never heard before started talking. It's the dawn of a new day. The people and them have taken control of their destiny. I stopped and sat down. The voice was that of a young man, and there was a disturbing urgency in his tone. Man, I tell you what, I sat there numb for so. He went on to say that the people had had enough, and the opposition party had taken control of the island, and will not be oppressed by the colonialist dogs anymore. I was real stunned, my heart pounding as I listened. The people should rise up and take up arms to fight the tyranny that they have endured over the past 25 years now. Now is the time, my comrades. Power to the people. Then the song Get Up, Stand Up by Bob Marley played. I sat there looking down at the floor. Man, all hell was about to break loose. Then I thought about Jane and got up, ran all the way to she door, and I knocked on she door. Who is it? She asked. And when I answered, she opened the door and immediately reached out and hugged me. I squeezed she, trying my best to calm she down. The radio was on, and the announcer was talking frantically, sometimes not making sense. In the background, I heard rumblings like someone was going through papers. He was giving details of where policemen can be found and giving the revolutionaries instructions on how to capture them. In the distance, we heard the faint sound of gunfire. Man, I tell you what, that was the angriest sound I've ever heard in my whole damn life. Outside, medical students ran back and forth to each other's room, trying to get more information about what was going on. I got up and opened the door a little and peered outside. People were running along the beach across the crystal blue ocean. Smoke bellowed out of a burning building. I closed the door and went back inside. I think we should go to my house. It will be safer there. Jane nodded she had, but did not move, reluctant to go outside. I took she hand and gently guided she to the door. Wait, she said. Let me take some of my things. She hurried over to the dresser and grabbed some of she clothes and stuffed them into a knapsack. She hoisted the bag over she shoulder and picked up some books that were laying on she desk. Then she looked at me, took a deep breath and said, I am ready. I took the backpack from she, walked over to the door, opened it slightly and peeped out. There were still some students running around out there. We stepped outside just as another medical student came running down the corridor. Where are you going, Jean? He asked, looking at me suspiciously. I'm going to his house. It should be safer there. The man looked at me, his blue eyes shifting from me to she. Jane brushed past him, running down the stairs. The man and I stood and looked at each other, two cultures on the verge of colliding. And then he shrugged his shoulder and walked down the corridor and went into the room next to Jane's. I ran down the stairs to where Jane was waiting on me, an impatient look on her face. We headed in the direction of my house, passing jeeps laden with young people carrying AK-47 rifles. Some of them recognized me. Power to the people, they screamed, some of them shooting off their rifles into the air. Jane jumped and grabbed my hand, squeezing it. I mean, she was used to guns, but the idea of maybe being the target put the fear of God in she. By the time we reached my house, I was a lot less concerned because I realized that the young people were so jubilant about their liberation, they would not harass anyone. Jane too realized this and was fast becoming a little more relaxed. We got to my house and sat in my room listening to the reports of the takeover. One by one, the revolutionaries were taking control of police stations and government offices. I thought about my students, and I wondered how many of them were involved with this action. I mean, I knew how upset they were about the attack by the hooligans months ago. I even heard some of them talking about revenge. I thought of Alison and her grandmother. Did they agree with what was going on, or were they concerned about what the young soldiers would do? Jane was sitting on my bed, and I still saw a hint of fear in her eyes, so I got up and walked over to she. Why don't you try calling your family and let them know you're all right? She slowly got up and went down the stairs, and I heard the sound of the old rotary phone, and then she was talking in a hushed tone, so I walked over to the window and looked outside. The backyard was silent. The sea was still. No boats, no seagulls, not even the sound of children playing. I looked over at Ken's house. It too was real quiet. It was like the calm before the eye of the hurricane blast across the land. Jane walked up behind me and wrapped her arms around me. I took a deep breath. It seems like every time she touched me, I had to struggle to catch my breath. I turned around and looked at she. A teardrop rolled down she left cheek, and I gently wiped it away with my thumb. The phone went dead when I was talking to my dad. He was so worried when I told him what was going on. I kissed she on the forehead. It was the only thing I could think of doing. I thought about my mother. I bet any money she was real worried too. And now there was no way I could call she to let she know I was fine. I told my dad where I was, and he felt a little better that someone on the island was looking out for me. I hugged she, squeezing gently. I wanted she to know that I would not let anything happen to she. Around 6 o'clock, the revolutionaries had mopped up what they thought were the last remnants of resistance, and the leader of the opposition was named Prime Minister of the island. When the announcement was made, we heard cheering coming from Ken's house, and loud music suddenly erupted all over the village as more people ventured outside. Jane and I left the house and walked back to she dome. She wanted to get more of her things. We passed groups of young people laughing and dancing, singing the praises of the new leader. The older people seemed a little more concerned with what had happened, but even some of them joined in the celebration. When we got to the dorms, there was a large group of medical students standing in front of it. The blue-eyed man from earlier came over. Look at them, he said, pointing to a group of young people celebrating on the beach. The pungent scent of marijuana filled the air. Rastamen, was having a celebratory smoke. Jane brushed past him and went up to she room while I walked over to the Rasta men and began talking to one of them I knew. "We take over, Dicky boy," he said, a big joint in his hand. He reached it out to me and I shook my head. He pulled it back and reached it up to his thick lips and sucked, smoke floating out of his mouth when he spoke. "Yeah, man, things could be a whole lot better now," he said as Jane walked up to us holding a small briefcase. I said goodbye to the Rasta man. He looked at Jane. "Don't worry, lady. This year is a peaceful revo. No one go hurt you and your American friends." Jane smiled another smile and looked at me. The Rastafarian looked at she. He droopy eyes inducive to smoking way too much damn ganja. "Any friend that Dicky boy is a friend of we. I used to lie with him in school, man. We used to get into all kind of thing we." And he laughed, a roaring laugh. Jane's smile grew bigger. I don't know if she was tickled that he wanted to protect she, or if she was laughing at the bellowing sound coming from such a little man. I took the suitcase from she, just as the Rasta stretched his hand out. "My name Ras Itran." Jane took his hand and he shook vigorously. "If you need anything, just come to me, okay?" Jane shook her head. "Later, Rasta," I said and walked away. Jane waved at him. "Jah guide, my brethren. Come by my house and see me sometime. Tell me how your family doing and thing," he said, and then looked at Jane. He waist long dreadlocks twirling around the body. The joint in his hand popping as seeds exploded, falling onto the ground. "Don't let the system get you down, my sister," he said, showing big white teeth, then turned and joined the other Rasta men who was singing a Jimmy Cliff song. "Treat the youths right, or you're gonna be playing with dynamite." Their voices trailing off as we went. It was late afternoon and the sun was not as hot as it was earlier in the day. Jane held my hand and I could tell she was a lot more at ease. In the distance, we heard gunshots, but they did not seem to frighten she as much as they did earlier. I mean, the girl grew up in West Virginia. Them mountains were known for a lot of hunting. We walked back to my house and got there in time to sit at the window and watch the sun fall into the imaginary line in the ocean. Days went by and Jane had practically moved into my house. I sure didn't mind because she made the house smell like a flower garden. The medical school had gone back to its regular classes, though some of the students had left the island. Ken's brother was back. I would see him walking in the yard wearing the dirty green uniform of the People's Revolutionary Army. He would wave at me and shout, "Long live the revolution!" I had gotten involved with some of the educational programs instituted by the new government. I mean, these people seemed like they were trying to do some good. I even spent some of my weekends helping the farmers and them. I tell you what, working all day on the banana plantations was a real humbling experience. It amazed me how happy them people was, getting up at the crack of dawn, walking until the sky turned gray and the stars twinkled in the sky. Damn, people had plenty resolve. Slowly, everyone was settling down to the way things were. Well, except for the American government. They were not too happy at all about this change in leadership. President Carter had given a speech about how the communists had taken over the island and somehow the civilized world would have to stop the movement of the ungodly system that was spreading through the Caribbean and South America. The former Prime Minister was in exile in New York and was trying his best to trump up support to get rid of the new government. Soon, Russians and Cubans came to the island claiming to help build it up. I mean, why in the hell didn't they so-called superpowers leave us alone? Some of the people were not too happy about them being there, but most did not seem concerned with their presence. I saw Alison at school every day. She was not as intense as she used to be. The suspicious look replaced by an odd smile. I even started participating in military maneuvers. The army had to train the people to defend the country in case of an invasion. Still, I was real cautious about dealing too much with them. I mean, all them damn guns in the hands of young people was not the best thing for the country. Jane sometimes helped with teaching classes with the older people who had not finished their schooling, and she seemed to be enjoying herself. I tell you what, that woman was not only beautiful, but she was real generous too. Life was beginning to get back to some kind of normalcy. A few weeks went by, and one Friday night, after a hard day at the school, I found myself sitting at my desk at home looking at a stack of test papers. I could not bring myself to grading them, so I got up and walked over to the window. It was the first time I looked out there since the last time the woman in white appeared. The moon was out, causing the leaves to glitter silver against the dark night. Jane was staying the night at the dorm. She had a major exam the next day and decided to study with some of the other students. Ken's brother was sitting at the window. I waved at him, and he saluted me as if I was the damn commander or something. I wondered where he had went the days he was missing. Some of the people and them in the village said he had gone to Cuba for military training, but no one really knew. He moved away from the window, waving at me, then disappeared into the house. I stayed at my window watching the yachts go by, the dark bodies casting shadows on the ocean, the red lights on their masks looked like moving lighthouses. I walked away from the window and went to the bed, leaving the window open so the cool sea breeze could flow through the room. I dove onto the bed and was soon fast asleep. Around 3 a.m. or so in the morning, I was awakened by the sound of someone crying in the yard. I sat up in bed and listened for a while, hoping that whoever it was, they were just passing through. When the crying did not stop, I got up and stumbled to the window and looked around the yard, but saw no one. I called Ken's name because sometimes his mother would lock the doors if he stayed out too late. That woman had a strange way of disciplining his son. I got no response, but the crying became more intense, as if someone was experiencing some deep emotional pain or something. I leaned out as far as I could, squinting my eyes to see better in the silver light, when suddenly the crying stopped and a deafening silence followed. I was real puzzled. I mean, did I just imagine the whole damn thing? I was still half asleep, and the cold breeze bit into my skin, making it numb for a second. I began to close the window, feeling a little silly. I mean, whoever it was must have left the yard. I had almost got the window shut when I heard the propeller of a fishing boat going by, its small engine laboring to carry its load of fish. I wiped a bead of sweat that trickled down my face and rubbed my fingers together, puzzled. I mean, it was a cool night. I did not feel hot. Why was I sweating? Then like an electric jolt, it hit me. A hot flash that felt like someone had injected the sun's rays directly into my vein. My stomach seemed to twist into knots, and I inhaled hard, trying to get air to my lungs. I looked down and saw the Diablesse standing at the bottom of the window, she arms outstretched, she eyes twinkling in the moonlight. Before I could stop myself, I had one leg out the window, and I was falling backwards. The window disappeared as the night seemed to turn to day for a second. And then there was complete darkness. Surprise, surprise. She is back. I wonder what will become of old Ian.